What's going on, everyone?
Hey, Twitch.
We're back. And YouTube. Hello, YouTube. We're going to continue on in Revelation today. We are in chapter 6, verse 9. We're going to start with the fifth seal, because that's where we ended last time. This is part 3 of our, not really in-depth verse by verse, but maybe a little bit of an overview of Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And I also came up with a question the other day, and I think I know the answer.
Okay.
Of at what point in Revelation do we get to the point that we have not gotten to yet in life? Because I know a big part of Revelation is to do with Rome coming to...
Things that are happening
soon. It's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming, and we'll probably talk about it later, but I'm assuming that we're in the Great Tribulation now. But, I mean, we don't know.
I mean, we are, without a doubt, in the end times.
Yes.
But we've been in the end times for...
Since the beginning of Christ.
2,000 years. Because the Christian dispensation, the Christian time, is the last time.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be anything else. I mean, we go back through Genesis, and that was the patriarchal time period, then the time of Moses, the Mosaic dispensation, and now we're on into the Christian dispensation, and that's it. After that, there is no more time. A lot of folks, whenever we look at beginning of chapter 21, people will take that as yet to come.
Okay.
And we'll get to that
Eventually,
yeah. And we're making pretty good strides. We're not
it's not that very big of a book, so
we're not as quite in depth as we are in the book of Genesis, where we're still slowly lagging behind for a year and a half, and we're still in chapter 19 or something like that. But they kind of pick up 21 as with the new heavens and new earth, that those things are going to be Judgment Day, when the old heavens, the old earth are destroyed.
Yeah.
And then what's left is the spiritual realm, heaven. But there's even a lot of debate on that, of why there's all of a sudden this switch. And so we'll get into that as we get into chapter 20 and 21. But we're definitely in the end times. We can go as far as that. And I'm not so sure I can be one of these people that take the whole book of Revelation to everything has been completely completed. But we'll get there.
Yes. So, back in chapter 6, verse 9, they're opening the fifth seal, and John saw under the altar the souls of those who have been slain because of the word of God and the testimony that they maintained. And they called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" And God tells them, you have to wait a little bit longer.
Gotta wait.
Yep.
That's right. That's what sometimes God answers prayers that way. You gotta wait.
And now, when I read this originally, I thought to myself, are these souls in heaven?
Possibly.
Because what would be the other choice? Because I know that we talked about heaven and hell, and it's been a while.
The other
I need a
option
refresher.
would be these would be people, maybe not quite in heaven, but they're in Abraham's bosom. We kind of go back to that story, parable that Jesus tells of Lazarus and the rich man, and there was Hades and then Abraham's bosom. And so that's a possibility. Or it is they are in heaven waiting for their persecutors, for God to enact vengeance upon them for what was done to them. And really kind of interesting with this fifth seal is the change that has happened. I mean, the first four seals were all about these horses and their riders, those things that they symbolized, war, death, pestilence, famine, and what is coming with them. And here, it's something really different, where now we have these people who are under the altar. And is that the altar of burnt offering that we see from the Old Testament? So are these Old Testament saints who have been looking forward to the Messiah, and why they've been doing that, they were slain?
That's what I was going to ask.
That's a very good possibility that it is, since the altar is mentioned here. Because for the Christian, the altar doesn't have the significance that it did to the people under the Mosaic Law, because it was, the altar of burnt offering is, where they sacrificed for the forgiveness of their sins. The blood was poured out at the foot of this altar. So there's a lot of importance there, and kind of that symbolism of these people, are there because their blood was spilled out in martyrdom. But they're waiting for vengeance.
Yeah, I was wondering if these were the people of the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm. It's a possibility. I wonder, because that symbolism there at the altar, that it very well.
And I took it because I didn't take it as they were in heaven yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't, the whole revelation hasn't been not revealed but fulfilled.
Right.
Yet.
Right. And there's still the vengeance isn't going to happen yet.
Yeah.
So that's not at Judgment Day. So that's not happening yet, and there's still time before that retribution, vengeance takes place, and there's going to be more, right, who are going to be killed.
Yeah.
The end of that, verse 11, fellow servants and the brethren who would be killed as they were, was completed. So there's still some more martyrdom that's going to happen.
Yes.
With this seal.
And this one seal really got my brain thinking.
Okay.
Because then I started thinking about death and going to heaven, and if these are in fact the Old Testament followers of God who died for their testimony, and they're not in heaven yet, then, like we talked about in the Heaven and Hell podcast, then since he said there's still people to be martyred, that would assume to be people like us. I would assume.
Yeah.
And so that means all of those people and the rest of the people are still waiting on that time. So are they waiting for the second coming? So then the new heaven is on the new earth, and then they're raised.
And that's what I guess what I believe, what I understand.
Yeah.
Of Scripture, that they're not the.
It's not that they're not in heaven.
Right.
But they're not
paradise. Yeah. And I don't ascribe to this idea of purgatory. Excuse me. And because of the whole teaching of purgatory is you can really buy your way out of the situation you're in. And I don't ascribe to that, let alone the buying your situation out, but that you're only disciplined, beaten for a time, punished for a time, and then able to go. It almost seems in everything else that I see through Scripture that, while we are alive on this earth in the physical, this is our proving ground. This is our opportunity to, make those choices.
This is where you'll get beat.
Yeah, right. And then after death, solidified in one of these two places, whether paradise or Hades. Again, going back to Jesus and Lazarus and the rich man. And like these folks would be waiting for the new heaven to be ushered in. And that's kind of my understanding of this.
Because I forget where I read this, and I'm probably going to paraphrase it incorrectly, but what also got me thinking about that whole subject too was because I read somewhere, and I can't remember where, that there's this concept that people ascribe to, I don't know, believe, that the soul and the body were meant to be together. So then when you die, you leave your body, and your soul is wherever it is, and that's like your soul naked.
Okay.
It's not whole still, and it becomes whole again whenever the second coming of Christ and the new heaven and new earth, and then he raises your body and jams your soul back down your throat, and then you're whole again.
Yeah. And
I don't know how much of that is biblical, but it was an interesting thought.
well, when you go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, there is that essence of that, of that separation, and the body has to go from corruptible to incorruptible, from temporary to eternal.
Yeah.
Those things, that there's going to be a changing there. And you do see this kind of idea that there is, the body goes back to the earth, but then also we're raised up from the dead, even though the soul goes back to God who gave it at the point of death. And so a lot of times there's a lot of questions that come up, even, to me, of how exactly that works. And I'm not so sure that I have to have a 110% understanding.
I don't think we ever will.
Yeah.
Until we're dead.
Until we
and
experience
risen
it.
again.
Yeah, until we experience it for ourselves. I don't think that changes my faith,
No.
because I have a difficulty understanding exactly the process of those things. But I almost see that as of how that works. The soul is going to go into this temporary holding place, Hades or paradise, and then at the judgment, our bodies raised in some sort of different fashion, and at that judgment, going to the final destination of heaven or hell.
And I remember, like, the one thing that I remember from our heaven and hell discussion was how I viewed Hades and whatever the bosom of Abraham is as like bus stops. And I still consider them that, because I don't think, now that I'm kind of doing a little more research into this topic on my own time, which I don't have any to begin with, which is probably why the information in Revelation is so jumbled up in my head right now, because I was also doing more research in something else.
Yeah.
And but what my understanding is right now at this moment is that right now when you die, you either go to Hades and pretty much sit and wait, or the Abraham's bosom and sit and wait until the second coming, the new earth, new heaven, with Christ, and then he resurrects everyone, and then the second death for whoever's in Hades. And then you go to hell.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be. Well, it's separation from God, whatever comes along with that.
Right.
That's what you're getting. Or you are raised again and you just stay put where you're at, because you're in heaven now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I'm at in my understanding of this subject, which has nothing to do with Revelation, but I think it's a good talking point.
When we see these people where they're at, it brings up that question. And then I also question, okay, so at these bus stops, because there's no time, what is that like? Are we,
it feels like forever and not nothing at the same time.
Let's say John, when he died. So has he been chilling at this bus stop of Abraham's bosom for 2,000 years, give or take? And it feels like, hey, this has been a long time I've been chilling out here, and more people keep coming up, or because there is no time, it's almost like an instantaneous
What I wonder is,
change.
And I have two thoughts here, and I'll get into them. In verse 10, when they say, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" To me, that sounds like they have a concept of time. But that can also not mean that they have it might
placating to us.
It might just be for us to understand that these are old people.
Mm-hmm.
So then we do understand that these are people from the Old Testament, so they've been there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But they still might not understand what time is.
Right.
So who knows?
Who knows?
I would say it's outside of time, so they don't. Whoever's in those two places don't understand the concept of time.
Yeah. And then, on the other hand of that, we're just going to throw out these since we're thinking about them.
Let's do it.
And on the other hand of that is, even though God exists outside of time, since we are time-bound creatures in this body, could he also not provide time or a sense of time in these eternal spiritual realms?
Yeah.
He could, if he wants to.
Yeah. Why
if
not?
He wants to. Absolutely. So a lot of things for us to experience and to find out whenever we get there.
Well,
but one of the really kind of another points, about these seals is even though these are horrible things that are going on, the death, the pestilence, the famine, the martyrdom here at the fifth seal, again, you think about the reason why John is writing this, and these are horrible things.
Yeah.
But yet, God still prevails.
Yeah.
The Christianity still prevails in the face of death, in the face of famine, in the face of martyrdom. Good still wins.
Yeah.
God still wins. Even all these things are going on.
So, we'll move on. And, let me see. That was the fifth. Oh, here we go. Then they opened the sixth seal, and it says there was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair, and the whole moon turned blood red, and the stars in the sky fell to the earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. Since we know that, well, we don't know, but we can assume that this lines up with the Rome coming and the conquest of Jerusalem. I see this as...
I see that as well.
As arrows blocking out the sun. Because he says...
Oh, okay.
It turned black like sackcloth. He also makes the reference to the moon turning blood red, so arrows cause people to die, depending on where you're hit, but it will cause you to bleed no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that the stars in the sky fell to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
I take that as arrows raining down onto Jerusalem.
Yeah, and people,
yeah,
dying at the result of that. And any time, and this isn't the first time that we've seen this almost exact language of earthquakes, of the sun and the moon, sackcloth and blood, of the stars falling. We go through the Old Testament and we see these things. Haggai talks about the earthquake. And when Haggai talks about earthquake, it has to do a lot with uproar of politics, of governments coming in uproar because of difficulty. I mean, I guess you could say that we're experiencing that in the United States today. There's earthquake of political upheaval that's going on. The blackening of the sun, we see that multiple times throughout the book of Isaiah. We see that in Jeremiah and Daniel as well. And it's destruction of like kings and kingdoms and just this fighting and war that goes on. So I think symbolically, I like what your reference is. This war, and that's what it is. I mean, you think about things on fire and exploding. The black smoke that's covering up everything. That's when you're in that type of destruction. It feels like the world is coming to an end.
Yeah, and then the next verse kind of is, I don't know. I think I have an idea of what they're talking about. It says, the heavens receded like a scroll, being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place.
Mm-hmm.
Are they alluding to the fact that even the heavens can't help them.
I think, and then again, just the downfall of, these islands, great and small, these nations, some small, some not as powerful, some huge, like Rome, when they're brought to their knees, it seems like the end is here. How horrible it is for such a powerful nation to be brought down and, being rolled up as a scroll. That idea of kind of, it's the end, the completion. There's no more to write about Rome.
Yeah.
Because you're rolling up that scroll. It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it says that pretty much everybody on the earth ran to the mountains,
Mm-hmm.
and they hid there.
Mm-hmm. And that's another one of those questionable things. If we take this section of chapter 6, that these are, this is what exactly happens when Jesus comes back, right? And all these things, he says it happens into a blink of an eye. It's quick, right? If these seals are opening and, these horses and things like this, is all about the destruction of the world at the end of time, when Jesus' second coming, and the sun's turned and the moon's turned, what good's it going to do to run to a mountain?
Yeah.
There's no place to hide, right? But yet these people, when you think about falling of kingdoms, and maybe it's better not to be in the middle of the city when your nation is falling. If anybody comes to the United States to try to take it over, I'm sure, every movie you see, they're going to hit the big cities. It's going to be LA, it's going to be New York, it's going to be DC, it's going to be those highly populated areas. Back home in the holler, West Virginia, you could chill out there for a long time. What was that? The movie Red Dawn. They just kind of redid that one. If you guys have seen that, that's how they kind of survived. They hid in the mountains. You're scarce out there. It's harder to find you in such a vast area. So you can flee to the mountains and have a chance of survival. But if it's the end of the world,
you can't go
and
anywhere.
the heavens and earth are going to melt with a fervent heat.
Yeah.
You can't. You're not going to hide from God's eyes.
I was going to say, if anyone comes to the U.S. to do that, everybody's going to hide behind their rifle.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So
we'll absolutely put up a fight.
Yeah. That's the end of chapter 6. Going into chapter 7, they started with John seeing the 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth. I'm assuming these are the winds of judgment. To me.
The winds of judgment, the winds of the... I don't know, I want to say tribulation, but war.
Yeah.
He's
I can also
holding
see
these things back.
I also thought to myself, since you said war, could these 4 winds that are being held back by 4 angels also be the 4 horsemen? A lot of 4s.
I don't know. I would say probably not.
Yeah,
I mean, we do see 4s, but there's very specific when these horses, the different colors, and then it was specific about the riders on these horses, that they weren't called angels. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wonder that difference there. These are 4 angels, 4 messengers that are there for this specific purpose to hold back these things that are to come.
Speculation.
And you see a difference. And we understand, chapters and verses are all added much, much later after these things were written, almost, 1,500 years later.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those good chapter breaks, because you see John says after these things.
Yes.
And so these four angels who are, holding back these, this kind of idea of destruction, judgment, isn't within the sixth seal.
Yeah.
This is something that's just happening
They're just,
after the time
they're there.
that the sixth seal was opened, yes. Because it wasn't during the opening of that sixth seal.
And so John says he sees those angels, and he saw another angel coming from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he told the other angels, "Don't harm the land or the sea or the trees until I put the seal on the foreheads of the servants of God, of our God."
Mm-hmm.
And he sealed the number, or 144,000 people from the tribes of Israel.
All right.
12,000 from each tribe.
Mm-hmm. Then he lists
Why?
all the tribes there.
Why did he? Why?
Why?
Yes.
Well,
I ask why because I've already read chapter 7, so
okay.
that's why I'm asking why.
Okay. I got you.
Well, we'll finish chapter 7 quickly then, because after they seal the 144,000, John says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.'" So now I ask again, because it has context, why the sealing of the 144,000?
What did the seal mean?
Servants of our God.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see later, I don't know how much later, that everybody's sealed. You're sealed one way or the other.
Yeah.
You're either going to have the seal of God or you're going to have the seal of Satan.
Yeah.
That's going to be visible to all people. And so there's no straddling the fence.
Yes.
You're going to be one or the other.
If you're on the fence, then you're the other.
Right, yeah, okay. Yeah. Probably, yeah. Yeah, that lukewarm idea, again, that we go back to chapter 3 dealing with. So then do we see a difference here between the 144,000 to 12,000? Is it a literal number? I'm not so sure. I take it as a literal number, but almost this idea that it's just not as big as the other number.
Yeah.
And so, just again, complete, a number of completion of these people who were obedient to God under the Mosaic Law.
Yeah.
Because that's where the significance of the tribes come from.
Are we going with that the 144 sealed are the same as the multitude that he sees?
Well, we see this multitude is also sealed as well of God's. But there is some difference between the two.
And that's what confuses me, because it seems like the 144,000 are specifically Jews. Yeah. And then everyone else.
Then everyone else, because they come from every tribe, every.
So I'm taking this as there's still. See, I was going to say I'm taking it as the Jews are still the chosen people, but they're not, because there is no Jew, there is no Gentile.
All God's people are chosen people.
Yeah. So now this confuses me.
Okay.
Why the sealing of the specific Jewish people, and then the great multitude from pretty much the Jewish people and then everyone else?
Here's my thought: is I wonder, because I don't know, is it easier for us to be Christians than it was for them to be Jews.
Yes.
Simply because
not even going to act like it isn't.
We've seen the Messiah.
Yeah.
Right? We understand.
We don't have 615 laws to follow.
Right. We understand the better promises that are given to us because of the Messiah. But for them, even Paul talks about how the Old Testament was veiled.
Yeah.
But the new covenant has been unveiled.
Yeah.
It's been uncovered. And so, things were difficult to follow, whereas we are under grace and liberty today. And so I wonder, and not that they're God's special people, God's chosen people, because, even Peter says that, we are the royal priesthood, the chosen generation.
Yeah.
But I wonder if they're given notoriety, just as we saw in the fifth seal, the possibility of those people being the Jewish people of the day who kept the feasts, who kept the sacrifices, who kept the law as perfectly as they could to earn that place, that they are still, they get that recognition.
I like that you said as perfectly as they could, because I don't think there's 144,000 Jewish people on the face of the planet that keep all of those laws right now.
Yeah. Well, even in Hebrews, that's kind of the argument he makes, that the reason why the new covenant was ushered in because nobody could keep the old perfectly.
Yeah.
And that was what was ordered.
Yeah.
In order to have the opportunity of heaven, you had to keep the law perfectly, and nobody could.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of that reason why the blood of Christ, needed to flow not only forward for us today, but also backward for them as well.
And Zenadine, I'm going to get to you in a second, but now I'm going to throw this completely off track and say, then why have all those laws if he knew they couldn't follow it?
What we're told, and I'll just say because what God said, was that the Old Testament was to be a tutor, a teacher, to teach us the gravity of sin.
Okay. See, now that makes sense.
Yeah, to see how disgusting sin is in God's sight.
All right. That's acceptable.
All right.
Now, Zenadine asked, doesn't Romans say that God still has some plan for the Jews?
I think his plan for them was to come to Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, Christ was the fulfillment of it. I don't know. What is it, like a flying ant?
Yeah.
Just crawling around in your microphone.
Yeah.
The church has got termites. I don't know.
It's dangerous in here.
I don't believe that in the Christian time period that anywhere that I can recall or remember that somebody who is still professing to be a Jew, waiting for the Messiah to come, would be considered, I don't know how to word it, eligible for heaven, because then at the fact you're denying that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and that is essential. If you got a specific verse, throw it at me there, Zenadine, and we'll take a look at it. But from all things that I can recall in my mind, and that's Paul's cry was that he if he could give his life for the brethren, and that they would be saved and come to Christ, that he would do that, but they wouldn't. So he was going to kind of leave them in the dust and become the minister to the Gentiles.
So, Zenadine, if you ever find that verse, put it in and we'll touch on this subject again. But to move on into chapter 7, they praise God, and one of the elders asked John, "In these white robes, who are they, and where did they come from?" And John said, "Sir, you know." And the elder, whoever he is, said, "These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." And that's why I think we're in the tribulation. For that purpose. Really not a very strong argument on my part.
Well, I mean, we are. You know?
Yeah. And that's why I was wondering if at what point in Revelation are we at currently? And that's why I asked that question.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it would depend on your strict interpretation of, what these symbols mean. Because if you take it as a kind of a dual prophetic thing, that these things are historic and happening with Rome, but also that some of these things are currently going on in heaven, or that will come.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a difficult answer to say, okay, at this chapter, at this verse, this is the great divide.
Because also everyone has to remember too that, the time is kind of squishy during this period where John's writing. I think because it's showing him the future, but I don't think he's really grasping time in relation to how we know it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm seeing it as the people who are coming out of the Great Tribulation in that part in 1714, out of order of everything else. Just to show John that these people who followed God and believed in Jesus and did his commands, this is what's going to happen to them.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what you're referring to, chapter 6, verse 17, right?
No, chapter 7, verse 14.
Okay. And I'm going to tie into that, chapter 6,
okay.
Verse 17.
Nice.
Because to me, this seems like chapter 7 is the answer to the question that is proposed in chapter 6, verse 17. He says, for the great day of the wrath has come, and who is able to stand? When all this destruction is going on, who can be saved, right?
Yeah.
And then chapter 7 seems like it's the answer to who can stand and who isn't.
Yeah.
It's God's people.
Yeah.
Are the ones who are able to stand, even though there's going to be murder, famine, war, all these horrible things. It's God's people that he's going to preserve. It's God's people that he's going to protect. And whether we're talking about, the possibility of 144,000 of the Jews, the Christians there, verse 9 and following, he is going to protect them, and he is going to lead his people, and they will continue to go on. And of course, no matter how bad the destruction of Jerusalem happened, no matter how bad the persecution of the Christians in the Roman time period, no matter how bad the Christian persecution has been, for all those past 2,000 years and up till now, and whatever the future holds, Christianity is still going to be a force to reckon with.
Yeah.
It's still going to be there. His word will never come to an end. He's promised that.
And to build off of that, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the Book of Eli.
Oh, yes.
I have.
It's a good movie.
It is.
I like that movie.
It's a very good movie. And I think it's very accurate in the idea of this book is extremely powerful. It's probably the most powerful thing on the face of the planet. You may have your nukes and whatnot, but this book changes people.
Absolutely.
And that is the most powerful thing you could possibly do.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to put that out there for no particular reason.
No, I think it
also
fits well because... Okay. What are you plugging?
The Book of Eli.
Oh, okay. The movie.
Yeah. Go see it.
Go see it. The hope. No matter how bad things get, I don't know, again, kind of really what the future holds for us and persecution as Christians.
If you did, I'd buy the lottery ticket.
But, right, no matter how bad things get, we can always trust in and rely on God.
Yeah.
And if every, like that movie, if every book of the Bible is taken up, stolen, and burned, somehow, some way.
He will find one blind guy.
That's what the movie
I just
tells,
ruined
right?
the whole movie for everyone, so there you go.
But one blind guy with a book of Braille that memorized the whole thing.
And nobody else can read Braille.
But how many times throughout the history?
So now you don't have to see the movie. You're welcome.
You know, in the Christian time period, how many times throughout history has people, you know, that was one of the things Hitler tried to do. Have people tried to stop the Bible? And I don't know what's going on in California, but maybe that's what they're trying to do out there. Who knows? But it will never stop. You know, there's always going to be some way that his word will be preserved.
Yep.
His church will never cease. And really, I think that's the thrust of the book of Revelation. You know, giving hope to those Christians of the time that no matter how much persecution, how much bad things are going to go on in the face of Rome and the face of other nations that come up against you, the church will still continue. You still have a home in heaven. Hold on to your faith. Keep moving forward. And it's the same message that's given to us today.
Yep, and I will continue to be a thorn in your side.
That's right.
So, there's more glory given to God for the rest of chapter 7. Jumping into chapter 8 and 7th seal. And the golden, I'm going to call it a censer.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but that's what I'm calling it. So they opened up the 7th seal, and there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. Which, again, there is no time in heaven. He's just telling you it was about 30 minutes, give or take, infinity.
All right. This is a horrible, horrible joke. All right? And all you women out there, forgive me. But this verse proves to us that there are no women in heaven. Somebody told me that once a long time ago, and I do that and get myself in trouble every time because there was silence for about half an hour in heaven. Oh, forgive me.
That confuses me too, because they said that the 4 eyeballed things were praising him non-stop.
Yeah.
As were the 24 elders.
But
continuously.
So is that the magnitude of
the
this
seventh seal?
Yeah. Right? Again, the number of completeness, right? Don't go home and tell the missus that. We'll all find ourselves in trouble. And as soon as my wife listens to this, I'll be in the doghouse again. But she laughs with me. She thinks my jokes are horribly corny, and just whatever. But you know, so again, the complete seal, the last seal. That, you know, that's what how many seals are on the scroll.
Yeah.
And so this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so does the praising of God cease at this moment, because this is such a magnitude event?
It's like when you get called to the principal's office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone gets real quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So
everything stops.
That's when John sees the 7 angels with the 7 trumpets. And another angel had a golden censer and came and stood at the altar. He put incense in it with the prayers of God's people, and then he chucked the thing at earth.
Yes.
I mean, that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And there came thunder, flashes of lightning, and earthquake. Pretty much the same stuff that generally comes whenever heaven's talked about.
Mm-hmm. You know, and with these trumpets and the burning incense, you know, again, more of the picture of war.
Yeah.
The picture of destruction that is happening. Where, you know, so we move from chapter 7, where some of these things are being held back.
Yeah.
You know, for that time, and John is able to see, you know, God's people preserved, God's people protected, and then we move into 8, and the last seal's open, and then, I don't know how you want to say it, here it comes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you open the 7th seal, now we have 7 trumpets that you have to go through. Mm-hmm. And those were a lot worse than the 7 seals.
Yeah. And, you know, again, we go back to the Old Testament. when we see the trumpet blast,
Yeah.
it was a call to war. You know, Joshua, right, marching around Jericho.
Yeah.
They were to do that and blare the trumpets and scream out. And they would do that every day for 7 days. On the last day, they did it for interesting 7, huh? And the last day, they did it 7 times and blowed their trumpets, and the walls came tumbling down. It's that shout of war, of coming hurt that's coming about.
So, the first trumpet is sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Which, personally, I don't care about the grass because I don't like to cut it anyway.
Right.
The rest of it's kind of bad. The grass I'm okay with.
And we're starting to cut grass now.
I know. I have to do it today.
And I don't think, again, symbolism. It's not that the grass is that important and that, this specific amount of grass has been burned up. But you think, again, the destruction, the devastation that happens at war.
Yeah.
You think about how Rome would come over and to destroy things. You just awake a fire in front of you.
Yeah.
As you're coming through, as you're bringing all your equipment in, as your soldiers are marching over. You kill all those things just by the massive transportation.
Oh, yeah.
As people marching over.
Yeah.
And again, just pictures of war zone and destruction.
So the second trumpet is sounded, and it says, something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of thirds.
How have we ever seen war so bad that water, seas, oceans turn to blood?
Definitely creeks in the Civil War.
Yeah, and you look at Normandy.
Yeah.
The destruction that happened there, and that whole beachfront covered in blood, the water, blood, and a lot of death that is going on.
The third was sounded, and a great star blazing like a torch fell from the sky on a third of the rivers, and on the springs of water. The name of the star was Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter.
Became bitter, and that's what wormwood.
It's a bitter substance.
The idea, yeah.
That's what the Bible tells me.
Bitter sorrow. That comes from because of all the grief, right?
Yeah.
The sadness that comes with this sort of war that happens. Not very many people go around and having a heyday and going to comedy shows and enjoying life when there's such a horrible war that's going on, and you're worried about your loss of life. No joy in those things.
The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Again, for some reason I see that hail of arrows blocking out the sun, the stars, the moon, constantly, because they're just laying siege to everything. They, as in Rome.
And then doesn't it seem, a lot of these things very similar to what we saw in the seals?
Yes.
Like it almost was like these seals were, this is what's going to happen. All right, this is how horrible it's going to be. And then these trumpets are blaring in the events of those seals. This is when the war is going on, where these nations are coming up against each other, where there's so much death, right, that the waters are turning into blood. There's so much bloodshed. Again, the sun, moon, and the stars, blackened because of the devastation of war and nations being brought down.
I have to get into the fifth angel. So, John sees an eagle, and the eagle says, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels." So even the animals are saying this is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's... Woe isn't... A lot of times we'll say woe to horses.
Yeah.
To calm them down. This pronouncement of woe is the same kind of thing that we saw when Jesus was condemning the Pharisees.
Yeah.
And woe to the Pharisees, calamity kind of idea that these things are happening. Not woe to stop, but woe to, yeah.
So the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I, as in John, saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When the abyss opened, smoke rose from it like smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke of the abyss. And this is when it gets weird. And out of the smoke locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. I'm trying to find exactly where the description of the locusts are, because that's when it's interesting. So pretty much these locusts were not to harm the earth. They were to go after people but not kill people, just torment them. And by torment I mean torture. There are two different things. It's torture them.
Mm-hmm.
And
was it verse 12? I think is what you're looking for, maybe?
Verse 12?
Yeah, wait. The description.
Oh, verse 9 or 7.
Yeah.
The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. And their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. You don't even need to attack me, and I'd be terrified. That's torture itself. Just seeing that in my head is torturous.
They wore iron chest plates and tails like scorpions, right? What were these?
Disturbing.
Yeah, they're disturbing, all right. Right? Still, this idea of battle, this huge fire, it seems like a huge furnace. And so a lot of things, it's the same kind of, we're doing Genesis.
Yes.
On Thursdays. And it's the same kind of symbolism that we saw there with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. As Abraham, I don't think we talked about it quite yet, but as Abraham looks towards the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, it was like as a great furnace.
Yeah.
Because the things were burning so much. And so, these locusts that come out of the earth, it's evil men who are, we're not going to kill you. We're going to torture you, though. We're going to do everything to you to try to destroy you. And I think the imagery that's given there is to show us that these aren't really real locusts, as in the plagues of Egypt that we saw.
I hope not.
But that these are men who are dressed for war.
Hello, Mother.
They were gathering up all the people on the earth and just to
torture them.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a better term for that, but we understand what torture is.
So
right?
I think that's a good place to pause. We'll get to the 6th and so on and so forth next week.
Okay. So we're going to stop verse
13.
12? Okay,
well,
we'll start
12,
13.
12,
okay.
Whatever. The first woe passed. The other two woes are yet to come. Now we're on 13.
Okay. So I can mark down so I know where we're at.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's okay, Mother. You can hear it on the YouTubes after, if you would like. So, again, thank you for everyone for being here. Thank you, everybody in Twitch chat. For anybody who listens to this on YouTube, thank you for taking an hour out of your day to listen. So everybody knows we are on YouTube. Just YouTube search Walk in Obedience Ministries, and that'll pop up right at the top of the page for you, and you can subscribe, and you'll get a notification whenever we upload things. Right now we are doing various recordings that are not on there. Well, they are, but you can't find them. But we're going to put those up once we're done with all of them as like a weekly special type of thing. So yeah, that's what we're doing on YouTube. So if you want to see those, you have to be on the YouTube. So definitely go over there and check that out. Thank you, Dave.
Hey, thanks everybody for joining us on Revelation.
And
that's awesome.
As always, God bless, and I'll see you.